to Bering Strait in the east, vis-a-vis Alaska, and bordering on Norway on the one end and on China and Japan on the other. So we are really a huge country, and the Arctic has, we are also the world's biggest Arctic nation. But beyond that, Russian territory is also very heterogeneous. The Urals split or kind of divide Russia into the European part, which has been settled for the last 13 centuries at least, and the enormous Asian landmass of Siberia and Far East, which were only settled by the Russians in the course of the last 350 years. So it is really an enormous territory, and it's very heterogeneously settled. Because there is also another divide, north-south. This blue line approximately shows a southern stretch of the permafrost in Russia. So you see the Russian north is much bigger than it tends to look at the first sight. And very many areas in Siberia or Far East, although are not part of the Arctic as such, they are pretty northern in terms of climate, with temperatures falling well below minus 50 degrees sometimes in winter times. So the north is more for the Russians than the Arctic, and it's also a very major part of our national identity and of our national geography. And it has also made a strong impact on the Russian settlement, whereby, as you see, roughly 3/4 of the Russian territory lies in Asia, while 3/4 of the Russian population are in Europe, which poses the country with a global issue of maintaining domestic connectivity, to maintain this whole territory as a single whole. And beyond that, the areas east of Siberia are also sparsely populated and very unevenly populated. This is a very characteristic satellite picture. If you look at this, you will see that the European part of Russia is pretty well saturated, not as densely as Europe, but actually we just have more territory, but it's pretty well settled. But the further east we go, the narrower this settled corridor turns, concentrating heavily along the Trans-Siberian Railway, constructed more than 100 years ago, and its newer add-on, the Baikal-Amur, in the south, and the Northern Sea Route in the north. So these are essentially the two key transportation lines which keep Russia together, which are very important for Russia to maintain the connectivity, to maintain all areas of the country available and accessible for the people, and among other, to ensure that the Russian Far East is not a kind of forgotten backyard, which it very often looks like, but a flourishing gateway for Russia to the Asia-Pacific region, which is actually the key region, the most promising region of the 21st century. So this is a nationwide dimension why the northern communication lines are so much important for the Russia as a whole. But getting closer to the Arctic as such, it is indeed also a very important area for Russia. The Arctic is, in political terms, is a much newer phenomenon for Russia, because we have traditionally been talking about the northern areas, and you see they are pretty great. The Arctic emerged as a political phenomenon only in the course of the last 15 years, and especially after the 2007 Russian expedition to the Arctic, to the North Pole. And in 2015, we finally got the official borders of the Russian Arctic zone settled in a presidential decree. As you see, it's an enormous territory, over 5 million square kilometers, which is approximately 60% of the global Arctic landmass and some 80% of the global Arctic population. To the contrary of other Arctic regions around the globe, the Russian Arctic is economically self-sufficient. It gives, yields more income to the federal budget than it gets back. It stands, among others, for something like 90% of the Russian natural gas production, a major portion of metal ores and oil production. And it's indeed very important for communication and for military strategic reasons as well. So this sea route, which is called Northern Maritime Corridor, is stretching from Europe in the west to Far East in the east. It keeps together this enormous territory, and its eastern part, east of Novaya Zemlya, is called formally the Northern Sea Route. You see, it actually helps keep the whole of the Russian Arctic zone together, and it helps keeping this area settled and developed, because it's really very rich of natural resources. As of 2018, the Russian Ministry of Far East Development has also been put in charge of the Arctic, and they have been preparing the national strategy for the Arctic zone. And this year, President Putin signed the two first decrees actually enacting the new versions of the national Arctic strategy and Arctic policy. And I'm very happy to say that there have been also been 3 pieces of legislation adopted this year, which actually promote business development regardless of its size, whether it's big or medium size or small, throughout the Russian Arctic. So we really hope that there will be really much going on along the whole of the Russian Arctic coastal line. But talking about maritime communications, indeed, we should concentrate also heavily on the mega projects, and Russia has really several projects to boast with. Just to mention a few which have been implemented in the last 10 years or are underway right now as we speak. They include, for example, constructing a large transportation hub in Murmansk, which is the starting point of the Northern Maritime Corridor. A huge development of oil and gas resources in Yamal, which deserves a separate slide. A huge oil project by Rosneft, the Russian oil company, in Taimyr, which is going to produce 2 million barrels a day of oil within a few years. The floating nuclear power station, which Artyom will surely be talking more about. I don't want to steal show from him. And last but not the least, a huge environmental cleanup operation in the Franz Joseph Land in the extreme north, sponsored by the Russian Ministry of Defense. As you understand, all of these projects generate a huge cargo base for maritime transportation. That's why they are increasingly important for Russia. A few more words about the Yamal Peninsula, because it's of strategic importance and because it's directly relevant for France, among others. Yamal Peninsula is here. It's an area approximately 1/5 of the mainland France, and it contains enormous resources which had not been developed until just very recently, until the last few years. But now we have a expanding development here. Gazprom has put on stream the huge Bobomanenkovo field, which alone produces approximately 1/5 of Gazprom's overall production. It has been connected to the nationwide grid, and then further on to this controversial Nord Stream 2 pipeline to feed Europe with natural gas. Among Engie, the French company, is among the partners there. Recently, Gazprom has also started developing Kharasavay field, which is supposed to be in operation throughout this century. A bit south, 2 Russian oil companies have developed Novy Port oil field, and this has produced a new oil brand, which is being exported by sea, and the production license for this field is stretched to the year, just listen, 2150, for more than 100 years ahead. So there are really large-scale projects which are actually ongoing now as we speak. And certainly, talking about Yamal, we have to talk about Yamal Lng, which is notably a Russian-French-Chinese joint venture. Total from France holds nearly, I think, 20% in this project. It produces 16.5 million metric tons of liquefied natural gas per annum. And it is exported from the nearby newly constructed port of Sabeta. Here you see the ice class LNG tanker called Christophe de Margerie at berthing. And from Sabetta, the LNG can be exported both to the east, to countries like China or Japan, and to the west. Here offshore northern Norway, it's being reloaded from the ice class LNG tankers to regular LNG tankers from where it can be exported everywhere. I mentioned Christophe de Margerie with a special feeling because I personally knew this late president of Total. He was a member of the board of directors of my company, and I'm the secretary of the board. So I met him very often, and it was really a great tragedy when he died. But his name is now given to a ice class LNG tanker, which is a brand new technological breakthrough as it is. Right now, they think about constructing a new reloading facility in Uruguay, in Russia, to localize it in the Russian waters. And Yamal Lng is not the only project. The shareholders are now discussing new add-ons like Arctic LNG 2 and 3, which will expand this capability and expand the cargo base for maritime transportation manifold. The global dimension, last but not the least, is the third point, namely that the Northern Sea route is not merely important for Russia. It can also be a very promising international shipping line through the Arctic. There are essentially three of them: our Northern Maritime Corridor, or the Northeast Passage, as it is called in the West. The Northwestern Passage runs through the Canadian Arctic archipelago, and there is also the transpolar route, which runs close to the North Pole, off the limits of the Russian or Canadian waters. And among others, the Russian authorities really want to make the Northern Sea route also internationally competitive in order to grab an increasing portion of this possible transportation between Europe and Asia. So taken together, this has led to an enormous increase in the traffic along the Northern Sea route. You see, it has increased 16-fold within the last 10 years, while the transit has actually been quite limited. It was very important in the years like 2012 and 2013, where it stood for something one-third of the overall navigation. But when Russia started constructing these enormous facilities in the Arctic, as well as some military construction as well, they have actually overshadowed the transit, while the transit is still very important for us. And among other, Russia and China have agreed that the Northern Sea route is viewed now by Chinese as a so-called the Arctic Silk Road. And the Chinese are showing an interest in this. Russia has also used this opportunity to revamp its nuclear icebreaker fleet. You see the first of them here, but Artel will surely tell more about that in his presentation. But despite all this very tremendous increase, the plans for the future are even more impressive. According to the presidential decree signed in May 18, the turnover was to increase to 80 million metric tons in 2024. There were talks that it may be reduced to something like 60 million tons, although formally this target is still there. But the recent Russian Arctic strategy through 2035, which was adopted by President Putin just 5 weeks ago, aims at increasing this traffic to 130 million metric tons by 2035. Therein 10 million metric tons of transit goods. And as you understand, this includes or implies enormous investments and enormous installations, both in terms of various types of industries and also in terms of ports, facilities, satellite communications, and so on. Last but not the least, Arctic maritime route is not only important for transportation, but also increasingly important for modern communications. And I'm happy to say that last year, Russia, together with Finnish, Korean, and Japanese companies, have started constructing a fiber optic broadband line, which is supposed to run from London through Paris, Central Europe, to northern Finland and Norway, and from there along this northern sea route to the Far East, essentially providing Europe and Asia with the first ever land-based broadband high propulsion internet communication. So the opportunities are enormous. They are very highly important for Russia. They are potentially highly important for the globe. So we are pretty optimistic about the future. Thank you.
It was very interesting and inspiring, and you are quite convincing. And now I would be very happy. We are running out of time, so can we shift immediately to? No, it's fine. It was very interesting. Can we to Artyom? Artyom, can you give us the point of view of a company, of one of the major actors of this implementation of the Northern Sea route, please?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Irene. And now I will switch to my presentation. So can you see the slide properly?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfectly.
Okay. So it's a great pleasure for me to attend this meeting, and I would like to thank the organizers for kindly inviting Rosatom to this event. In my presentation, I'll speak more about current activities of Rosatom in the Arctic and about the clean energy solutions that will surely contribute to the development of this unique region. Now, just a few words about Rosatom. We're a state corporation that unites more than 300 enterprises, scientific and research institutes, and we employ more than 250,000 employees. I'm proud to say that we're #1 in the world by NPP units in international backlog, and currently we have 36 units in our overseas portfolio. This year we celebrate the 75th anniversary of nuclear industry in Russia, which is a significant milestone for us. And throughout all these years, we have been evolving from studying the world's first nuclear power plant to a multi-business energy corporation. And nowadays, we're providing tailor-made integrated energy solutions which meet a wide range of customer needs. Our core business, of course, is large-scale NPPs. However, since 1954, we have been developing small reactors for marine applications as well. The design of these small reactors for marine applications is a subsidiary of Rosatom design bureau KBM of Rikantov. Overall, it has designed and manufactured over 20 small reactors for civil applications. And we have accumulated great expertise of safe operation for small reactors for nuclear icebreakers, which is over 400 reactor years. So Russia is the only operator of nuclear icebreaker fleet in the world, and overall we have constructed 11 nuclear icebreakers. And in operation now we have 5 icebreakers and 1 ledge carrier. 3 more icebreakers of a new type are currently being constructed. And based on that vast experience of operation and design of the small reactors, we developed the world's only floating nuclear power plant called named after Russian prominent scientist Mikhail Lomonosov. So why did this idea came to our mind, and why did Russia need floating nuclear power plant? Well, Russia is the largest country in the world, and northern and remote areas occupy almost 50% of the territory. Well, quite a number of people live there, and what is more, richest reserves of minerals have been discovered and developed here. Okay. So northern regions of Russia are located in decentralized energy supply zone, and at these regions, fuel transport costs account for about 80% of the electricity price. This region also feature undeveloped infrastructure, roads, network, and energy facilities. And actually, floating nuclear power plant was a solution for this kind of region. So FNPP provides reliable and clean heat and power supply to the living areas and, well, ensures potential for future industrial development in Chukotka region. In the future, it will replace aging Bilibina NPP and Jones coal-fired thermal power plant, which will certainly make the environment much cleaner and the snow whiter. It is equipped with 2 KLT40S reactors that can generate up to 77 megawatt of electricity. And these reactors are quite similar to those used at icebreakers. The vessel itself is the characteristic of the vessel you can see at the slide. And one of the biggest challenges for our scientists was the need to maximize the period of permanent work at site without interruptions for fuel unloading and maintenance. So the achievement of FNPP Academic Lomonosov is its own fuel storage on board and refueling system that actually allows it to in fact reload itself. So due to this, the fuel cycle is extended to 3 years and the maintenance period up to 10 years. So after this period, it has to be towed to the shipyard, which lasts for about 1 year. The total lifetime is 40 years with possible extension. So now a few words about its commissioning at PVEC. So in December 2019, FNPP was connected to the grid and started supplying electricity to Chukotka grid and to PVEC city. And in May 2020, it was fully commissioned and started supplying heat as well. And it became the northernmost NPP in the world and the 11th NPP in Russia. And the US Power magazine named this event as one of the 6 key global nuclear events of 2019. So certainly FNPP brings certain social economic effects to the region. Of course, it improves the quality of life. Some of the effects you can see at the slide, for example, after the commissioning of FNPP, reconstruction of heating network started, and the transition from an open heat supply scheme to a closed one was completed. Comprehensive overhaul of the PVEC airport runway is underway, and in the future, direct flights from Moscow will be possible. Of course, new jobs are created. And of course, FNPP contributes to reducing CO2 emissions by replacing Jones coal-fired power plant, which is a source of harmful emissions. And of course, it guarantees the region's energy security. So after we launched FNPP with KLT40S reactors, we're moving forward, and now our flagship solution is Maritime, a small modular reactor that incorporates all the best features of its predecessors. Well, it is based on time-proven pressurized water technology, and this technology has proven its safe and efficiency throughout all stages of the life cycle. And innovative features like internal configuration has made it possible to significantly reduce the dimensions and the mass compared to KLT40S reactors. Also, such design almost eliminates the classic large-scale loss of coolant accident. So now we are developing the family of Maritime series SMRs, and they can be placed at land-based nuclear power plants, floating nuclear power plants, and modern icebreakers. Speaking about icebreakers, now Rosatom is renewing its icebreaker fleet with 2 new classes that would be more powerful than the existing ones. I'm proud to say that in October this year, state-of-the-art Arctic icebreaker successfully passed all the sea trials and was formally commissioned and began operation. It became the most powerful icebreaker in the world, and it is able to break through ice up to 3 meters. 3 more icebreakers with Rhythm series SMRs to enter operation in 2021, 2022, and 2025 respectively. So Russia pays great attention to the development of the Northern Sea route, as Mr. Krivorotov said. So in March 2020, Russian president signed a strategy paper that outlines our intention in the Arctic for the next 15 years. Well, it includes measurements to improve the socio-economic situation of communities in this region, as well as the further promotion of the development of the Northern Sea route. So it's our national priority to reach at least 60 million tons of annual goods traffic already by year 2024 and 120 million tons by 2030. And to reach this target, Rosatom is already constructing the new generation of icebreakers called Libre, with a new type of the reactors that will ensure year-round navigation by 2027. But we in Rosatom do not only work at floating solutions. By now we have developed the concept design of land-based small nuclear power plant. It is also based on Rhythm series SMRs, and its capacity is around 100 megawatt. So this station has a design lifetime of 60 years, and the change of fuel happens once in a 6-year time, and the capacity factor will exceed 90% during the whole 60-year lifetime, which makes it a really reliable electricity generation system. Speaking about the construction time, we expect it to be around 4 years for first of a kind, and we plan to decrease it to 3 years for nth of a kind. So scalable modular design is actually what makes Rosatom's solution suitable for local energy needs, and its capacity can be extended to meet the growing energy demand. We in Rosatom follow the policy to offer only reference solutions to our potential customers. And here I would like to quote Director General of Rosatom, Mr. Alexey Likhachov. He said that an important aspect of our foreign practice is that we also always follow the principle: first we build in our own country, and only then offer technology to foreign markets. So we are getting ready for first of a kind project in Russia. We are considering several sites, and the sites are very different, which shows that the project can address a wide range of customer demands. And the main target for this year is to determine which would be the best site for our small nuclear power plant. We plan to get the site license by 2023 and start the construction by 2024 and commission the nuclear power plant 2027. So Yakutia is one of the candidate sites. It's Ust-Yansk region. This is a remote area with an isolated grid, and overall about 10,000 people live there. So as of now, 2 potential sites were selected after comprehensive economic analysis and field works. And these sites include those near the Ust-Kuiga settlement. What is more, this region is rich in mineral resources. Among others are precious metal deposits. And what are the potential benefits of implementing this project in Yakutia? Well, almost, first of all, it's considerable reduction of the existing economically feasible electricity tariff for household consumers, about a half. So clean and sustainable electricity and heat supply. Well, actually, now the settlements in Yakutia are mainly supplied by diesel and coal facilities, and these facilities are a source of considerable amount of harmful emissions. Then energy independence of the region and the groundwork for future development of energy-intensive industries in the region. And at present, diesel is supplied from Yakutsk oil refinery or via the Northern Sea route from Murmansk. Of course, new jobs by constructing NPP and implementing mining and processing plant, and additional tax revenues to the region's budget. To finish my presentation, I can say that Rosatom will definitely play a considerable role in ensuring clean energy supply of the Arctic. Thank you.
Hello? Yes?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? So I would like to give the floor to our last specialist, the only one who is not Russian, the French specialist of the Arctic world, who will focus today on more environmental issues of the whole thing. So you have talked a lot about the fact that your energy is clean. Let's hear what is your opinion of French specialist. Hello.
Well, thank you so much, Irene. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you can hear me well.
Hello? I'm off again.
No, Irene, you're not off. We can hear you. So I hope you can all hear me this time. So good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. My name is Mikaa. I come from France here, indeed, and I lecture at Sciences Po and HEC. And my two areas of specialty are the polar regions and hydrogen. And so tonight, I'll be speaking just like 10 minutes, 12 minutes max on how hydrogen is becoming something in the Arctic that is very interesting for everyone who is keen to decarbonize activities in the Arctic. So I've put up a presentation as well. There you go. I hope you can all see it. Normally you should just raise your thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you so much. So basically 12 minutes and 24 slides to introduce you guys to the topic or to at least provide a French perspective for those who already know the topic. So basically you all know that our environmental issues do attract attention, even in Russia. I know we hear a lot of misconceptions, such as Russia is not interested in environmental affairs, doesn't really care about the environment, Russia is the bad guy, blah, blah, blah. We heard that a lot. And in fact, it's not true. And I think the presentations we've heard before have shown us that. But going further and deeper than what we've seen before, let's talk just very quickly about a type of solution that Russia is very keen on developing at the moment to basically show that, hey, you can develop green solutions in the Arctic as well, and that's hydrogen. So what you see here on the left-hand side of the slides, of course, the issue, the big environmental disaster you've seen in the Embarnaya River near Norilsk last summer. And of course, on the right-hand side of the slide is just a little element that has stricken the energy market, the metals energy market last March, with basically Rusal saying that Norilsk, has to pay more attention to the environment. A lot of things are happening in that regard, and no one should think that Russia is not interested in the environment. So when it comes to hydrogen, what we're seeing at the moment is three main projects. And here I'm not talking about small size projects. I'm talking about like larger size projects in development. Of course, some are linked to Rosatom because, well, in fact, whether we talk about the Africantov sub-company of Rosatom, or whether we talk about the Leipunsky Institute of Physics and Power Engineering, or the VNIIAES subsidy of Rosatom, you have a lot of companies on top of Rosatom which are involved in developing hydrogen in Russia today. And so the main projects we see emerging are those ones you see on the map here. Two projects in the Arctic or subarctic, and one near the Leningrad nuclear plant, which is not really Arctic, but it's also part of that dynamic towards hydrogen. So you may think that Russia is just following the hype, the hydrogen hype that we see in many countries around the world today. Well, in fact, Russia is a very long time hydrogen enthusiast, and Rosatom, well, the previous company that has become Rosatom basically has worked on hydrogen for more than 50 years now already. And even when President Putin got into power, basically one of the very first things that were discussed in the energy field at the time was hydrogen at the same time, with the Hydrogen Economy Forum being launched as early as 2000, and the National Hydrogen Energy Association likewise in 2000. So Russia is not jumping on the train now they've been on the train for long, in fact. And that's the reason why many companies, whether we talk about atomic hydrogen, so Rosatom, or whether we're talking about other types of hydrogen, such as blue hydrogen, which is basically gas-based hydrogen with the carbon capture system on top of it in order to decarbonize the SMR process that transform natural gas into hydrogen. I'm just putting this in very short and easy terms here, but you get the point. Basically, you see that many Russian companies have an edge on the market today. And it's true for nuclear hydrogen, and it's true for fossil fuels-based hydrogen as well. And in fact, one thing that hasn't come up in our discussion today is the fact that all the energy developments we're talking about for the Yamal Lng district, whether we talk about Bovanenkovo, whether we talk about Yamal Lng, whether we talk about Ob LNG, and so on and so forth, Arctic LNG too, of course. At the end of the day, if you really want to decarbonize this, this sector, you will basically need to turn this LNG facilities into something more environmental friendly. And that's where hydrogen comes into play as well here. And that's the reason why both Gazprom and Novatek are both involved in basically developing their skills in hydrogen at the moment. So in Yamal Lng, we've got a lot of potential, of course, because you can produce that hydrogen coming with LNG, basically. But the most interesting part is all the other things you can develop around this region that is not maybe linked to the gas industry. You could definitely develop hydropower-based hydrogen. You could definitely develop wind-based hydrogen. If you go to Chukotka, or if you go to the Kola Peninsula, you can definitely think about developing wind, hydropower, even geothermal as well. And that's basically a trend that we see happening not just in Russia, but also in Norway or in Iceland or in other countries in the Arctic. So it's not something, once again, that is, I'm trying to speculate on some things. Yes, this map is speculative because it's just potential we're talking about here, but still, this is potential that's pursued by many Arctic countries. And when it comes to Russia, well, Russia is one of the most serious ones in the Arctic today when it comes to hydrogen. Whether we talk about downstream applications such as regional trains, or whether we talk about big upstream projects like the ones I've just talked about, you see that there's a big trend around hydrogen, and Russia is definitely seeing hydrogen as a solution to decarbonize its energy mix, of course, but maybe even more importantly, decarbonize its energy exports in the midterm or long-term future. And pay attention to the many elements, many developments we're seeing happening now at the Ministry of Energy or with Rosatom overseas, which I'm very happy to share the floor with the representative today, because there's a lot of things happening here. And there's a lot of potential, and that's maybe because we need to talk about figures, right? If we don't talk about figures and prices, then it's just words. And here you've got figures, basically the potential for hydrogen in Russia in an export scheme to Japan, which is likely to become the first country for hydrogen demand in the near future. Basically, the potential is huge because Russia enjoys not only a geostrategic location that is favorable, but on top of that, it has a lot of capacities to produce low-cost hydrogen. And that's what makes it competitive. Once again, here I'm being very short here, but that's what makes it competitive in a nutshell versus its main competitors on the market today, which are Australia, Norway, but think about other comers to the market, such as Saudi Arabia, Brunei, and many other countries like Qatar, or even the United States, of course. So maybe the big question to you guys is, how do you get that hydrogen from Russia to Japan? Because the price looks good, promising, but how do you get it from one place to the other? And here, once again, what you're seeing here, the photograph, it's not a real photograph. It's a synthetic image, but what you're seeing here is a prospect. Norwegians are working on liquefied hydrogen, which is basically the same kind of process as liquefied natural gas, but with even a more energy intense process. But on top of that, a lot of people in Russia are working as well on ammonia. So that's basically hydrogen and nitrogen to export it. And some others are even working on LOHCs, so liquefied organic hydrogen carriers, which is basically hydrogen mixed with either methyl cyclohexane or hydrogen mixed with toluene. So that's basically happening as well. And well, it's the exact same kind of consequence we see for Arctic maritime development here as what we've seen with oil and gas and bulk in the recent past. Basically, if you develop that in the Russian Arctic, whether you sell it to Europe or whether you sell it to Northeast Asia, as in Japan or South Korea or whatever, basically anything you do, you will use Arctic routes. So once again, here you have a pattern which is very similar to what you've seen in LNG or in Russian oil developments with Novi Port, for example, or other oil projects in the region. And this is a very huge prospect as well for Russia on the policy field, because, well, energy-wise, it's interesting, the economics of it makes sense and so on and so forth, but there's a policy component as well to it. And pay attention to what's happened very recently, as recently as last June in the Arctic Council. So for those who are not familiar with the Arctic Council, that's basically the main, not the only one, but the most important diplomatic forum in the Arctic. And basically in the Arctic Council, you've got one working group, which is the Sustainable Development Working Group, SDWG. And as part of this SDWG, you already have 3 different programs working on hydrogen. One sponsored by Canada, one sponsored by the US, and one sponsored by Russia, which is actually co-led with Norway. That's been submitted and accepted last June. And that's the AHEAD program, which is a program aimed at basically the use and demonstration of hydrogen energy in the Arctic. That's really what it's about. So Russia is going to take over the Arctic Council chairmanship next May for the next 2 years. And of course, all the strategies that my colleagues have talked about will also feed into that chairmanship program. And here, when it comes to hydrogen, well, hydrogen will become also one of the pillars of Russia's chairmanship in the Arctic Council. And the main element here is the so-called Snowflake project. So the Snowflake project, it's an international Arctic station, research station that Russia aims to build in the Yamal Lng Okrug. And the idea here is basically to build the very first international scientific station in the Arctic or Antarctic that is entirely powered by renewables with a hydrogen system to store the energy and to redistribute it to the infrastructure. So here, very interesting project developed by the MIPT in Russia. Not very expensive, 20 million euros for the demonstrator. That's definitely doable. And it's supposed to be inaugurated by the end of the Russian chairmanship of the Arctic Council in May or April 2023. So this is happening, and this will, of course, help Russia put itself on the hydrogen policy arena. So just very quickly, because I'm running out of time, I've been talking about Russia a lot because that's today's topic, of course, but don't think that Russia is the only one in the Arctic jumping on that train. Pay attention to what's happening in Norway, pay attention to what's happening in Alaska, basically where hydrogen is seen as a very good way to mitigate the risks and decarbonize the so-called energy islands that you find in these remote areas. Pay attention to what's happening in the European Arctic at large, with countries like Iceland, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Greenland, which still belongs to Denmark, which are all going for hydrogen as well, with very ambitious strategies, very interesting industrial networks, and startup companies doing a lot of good things in there. pay attention to also the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, because some indigenous peoples, such as the Aleut, basically they are also in favor of developing hydrogen because they see a very interesting basically connection, a very interesting industrial connection between hydrogen development on the one hand and maritime transportation development on the other hand. So here, the two mix very well together, and that's why in Alaska or in Russia, you see a lot of hydrogen developments which are linked to maritime affairs, or same thing in Iceland, where in fact, the main maritime hub for Arctic routes that Iceland is developing at the moment, together with Germany and possibly with the US backers, will basically be not just a maritime shipping hub, it will also be a aquaculture center and a hydrogen production and exports center of production as well. So all these things is happening. You already have many projects, as I said, in the Arctic Council Sustainable Development Working Group, which cover hydrogen or so-called remote energy networks. All this is happening. Russia is contributing to some, not contributing to some others. And basically we see some kind of a duality here happening, with Russia having its own projects together with Norway, and on the other hand, the US and Canada and Iceland, with some non-Arctic countries as well, developing their own projects. One last thing, and I will end with that because I know I'm already 2 minutes past the deadline here. When we talk about hydrogen, it's not just about producing hydrogen in itself. It's not just about transporting hydrogen in itself as well. What you really need is to have a very well integrated value chain. And here in the hydrogen value chain, at least for the moment, one key element that you need is palladium. And once again, that has very big implications for the Russian Arctic, because basically if you need palladium to develop a hydrogen value chain that's vertically integrated, then you need to go to Russia. You need to go to Russia because once again, Russia is the #1 producer of palladium in the world. Second competitor is South Africa, and then the next competitor is Zimbabwe. It's just so down the line already. So Russia, once again, is very important in the palladium area. And actually the best palladium prospects today are either in Russia or the Swedish Arctic or Greenland. So basically, if we develop hydrogen, we will need to go mine some things in the Arctic, at least based on at our current level of knowledge. So all these things is happening. And of course, 100% of Russia's palladium prospects are either in the Arctic region of Russia or in the subarctic region of Russia. So once again, you see all these things, they really mix very well together. And I hope that you've enjoyed this very short introduction to the hydrogen, Arctic, and maritime nexus, because that's the best I could do in 15 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mikaa. It was extremely interesting. So we have seen 3 totally different but complementary point of view. Now I think it's time to give the floor to the audience. Do we have questions?
Yes, we have questions. One from Alexander Kaufman. So he's asking, how will Russian companies finance all these ambitious projects, especially in the current context of sanctions plus low energy prices?
So I would have a very similar question as well to our three speakers, because I have seen that President Putin has signed the project of development of this North Sea project on March 5th, 2020. So it was just about 10 days before we all realized that there is a serious pandemic, and about a month before we found that there is such an overproduction of energy for the level of growth we had in the pandemic's period. And now we can see that in the West, there is an enormous development of non-fossil energy. So will there be such a need of oil and gas from Russia Does it make sense? And is there money now in Russia for the same reason? My question is about the same as Alexander, but I mean the COVID context, I think, has dramatized the situation. So what do you think? How will Russia react to it? Budget, from the budget point of view, and will it downsize the projects and such a project as the Arctic route?
Let me maybe start answering and let my colleagues add something to that. But first of all, I use this opportunity to thank enormously Artyom and Mikaa for extremely interesting reports indeed. Mikaa, I especially appreciate that. You know, it was actually myself who has written this ahead project presentation for the Arctic Council upon a request from the Russian Ministry of Far Eastern and Arctic Development. They used me as a diplomat. So getting back to Irina's and Alexander's question, yes, indeed, this global situation today is having an impact on everybody and every process. Briefly, I would say that Russia is so far not going to revise its long-term plans. Let me reiterate that these figures, 80 million or 100 million tons in 2030 and 130 million tons in 2035 as target figures for cargo transportation along the Northern Sea route were enacted by President Putin no later than 5 weeks ago on October 26. And so far there's been no signs of essentially revising seriously those plans. And actually Total, who is the shareholder in Yamal Lng, has also purchased a large portion of shares in Arctic LNG 2 because they see prospects and they see real good commercial reasons for that. Indeed, the global oil industry, oil and gas industry is suffering enormously from COVID-19, and the global demand for oil has fallen, it fell by 30% this May, April, which was absolutely unseen ever since, I think, World War II. But the gas demand has not dropped that badly because gas is very important for heating, which was not hit that much as car transportation or air traffic. And also because the natural gas is the cleanest of all hydrocarbons. So we do see good prospects for that. This being said, indeed, the COVID-19 has spurred the global attention to the environmental issues of CO2 emissions because limited human mobility has brought about major positive change in the environment of Europe, including notably France or Italy, Russia, and China. And indeed, this will be used as a very strong argument for a so-called low carbon transition. This is going to have major long-term impacts on Russia, and I can reassure you that Russian researchers as well as Russian authorities follow this development. We need somehow to adapt to this in the longer run. That's for sure, and Russia is not going to miss both the opportunities and the threats which occur in this regard. Last but not the least, about sanctions. Yes, indeed, they have hit many Russian industrial developments. We have seen on a number of occasions that Western banks are, for example, unwilling to extend loans to projects in Russia, even those projects which are not sanctioned subject to sanctions by the European Union or the United States at present. The bankers say very openly that, guys, your project is going to take some 5 years, for example. Nobody knows whether or not the US Congress is going to introduce new sanctions to cover your project as well within the next few months. And that's indeed has a very negative impact. And as a side effect, that has spurred very actively our cooperation with Oriental nations who are not participating in the sanctions, and notably with China. Something like 60% of Yamal LNG financing was provided by Chinese banks and by the Silk Road Foundation. And indeed, it has impacts both on the Russian development and on the development of the economic cooperation between Russia and the West. In my personal opinion, which is shared by many Russians, it's very unhealthy, both for Russia and for the West, since you have asked. Thank you.
I can jump in unless my colleague would like to jump in first.
No, please, Mikaa, please.
Okay, will do. So I think there are a few misconceptions that we need to lift off here. The first thing is when you think about the sanctions, and Professor Krivorotov has very well explained that already. Well, there are plenty of other capital sources than the West. So basically, you're under sanctions. Yeah, go to Japan, go to South Korea, go to India, go to whatever, because that works. And in fact, when it comes to Russian Arctic LNG developments, and it was true for Arctic LNG 2, and we're seeing it now with Ob LNG, with Petro LNG, with Arctic LNG 1 and 3, which are also coming up online in this decade, surely. We see a lot of interest from investors coming from China, yes, but also from Switzerland, from Japan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, India. So it's coming from all over. Singapore is one, Vietnam. So it's going from all over. So based on that, basically Russia has, you know, other ways to get capital than going to France or elsewhere, and doubling down on that. Whether it's Total, whether it's Shell, whether it's BP, they're finding ways to provide capital to Russian Arctic LNG projects without using dollars or without using euros. So that also is a reality. Another key element here is that Russian LNG is low cost. So maybe we should explain the technicalities of LNG here to explain that. Basically, if you want to turn natural gas into liquefied natural gas, so if you want to liquefy it, you have to lower the temperature of that gas down to minus 153 degrees Celsius. Doing that is a pretty expensive process, both energetically speaking and economically speaking. So if you are in the Yamal Peninsula, let's say it's minus 30 out there, minus 50 out there. You basically have 100 degrees or 120 degrees Celsius down to go to liquefy your natural gas. If you do it in Qatar, if you do it in Nigeria, if you do it in the Australian desert, where the temperature is plus 30, plus 40, plus 50 degrees Celsius, then the temperature delta that you need to cover and pay for, both economically and energetically speaking, is 160 degrees, 180 degrees, 200 degrees Celsius. And that is very expensive. So in any case, that's only one of the elements of the reasons why Russian Arctic LNG gas, liquefied natural gas, is low cost. It's not the only one, but just this one enables you to understand why it's very interesting to go in the Arctic compared to other regions. And finally, and I'll end that, don't worry, and give the floor to you, Professor Larionov. The Russian Arctic is seen as a test bed for many investors and for many innovators today. So here, once again, it's a matter of you have the resource base, and you also have a political will at the local level, at the federal level, to basically welcome these investors, which is maybe not the same in other parts of the Arctic, in other Arctic countries. So all this will basically finance those projects. The Russian federal government will not finance everything, and it does not have to.
Thank you very much. What about Artyom?
So just to add a few words to my colleagues, speaking about the COVID-19 pandemic, it's heavily affected the global energy sector, of course, due to rapid drop in energy demand in many sectors of economy. And you know that according to International Energy Agency, coronavirus lockdowns have led to the biggest fall in energy demand in 70 years, expecting to fall for about 6% this year. And on the contrary, nuclear power has shown relatively good results compared to conventional energy sources. And at these hard times, Rosatom has continued its business activities. For example, the construction of Russian nuclear power plants abroad is proceeding on schedule. And we're not going to reconsider the target parameters, our target business parameters. So we are state corporation and we have enough resources to back up and to complete the planned projects in time. So this refers to nuclear icebreaker construction and land-based small nuclear power plant project. So that's my point. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think Cedric has some questions from the floor.
Yeah. We have several questions, 4 questions. So maybe it's our last 4 questions because the time is running. So to summarize the questions, one very quick. So it's which countries are currently producing ice-class ships? So that's one very short question. Then, is China cooperating with Russian actors on these different projects in the Arctic? So it's about Chinese New Silk Road project. Then, so in regards of transit voyage, so Russia seems to be quite selective as to who can use the NSR. Can someone comment on that, please? So it's yes. And the last one, does increased transit through the Arctic sea routes increase sea ice melting and regional warming? So it's the 4 questions. So if you can go fast on them, so summarize your ideas, it could be fine. It could be good.
Can I start right away answering Mathis's question on ice-class ships and selectivity of NSR?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So the countries currently producing ice-class ships, well, there's Russia, there's China, South Korea, and then you go to Finland, you go to Poland, you go to Norway, you go to Romania, Italy, Turkey. So you get plenty of countries that can build those ice-class ships, but not all of them actually do it. And moreover, the important part here is that the ship owners are also pretty diverse. You've got some ship owners from Greece, from Cyprus, from the US, etc., Japan, Canada. So basically, it's an international business. It's not only Russia or China that are building ice-class ships. And going to the question on the selectivity of the NSR, in fact, that's a common misconception. In fact, I've just pulled up the figures for this year, for 2020. In 2020, for the NSR, you've had 1,022 applications for ships to transit the NSR in one way or another, complete transit or partial transit. You've had 1,003 permissions, only 19 refusals. And if you pay attention to those 19 refusals, you realize that actually it's more or less all the time, basically application files that are not complete. So the selectivity of the NSR administration vis-a-vis applications, thinking that they refuse a lot of ships and blah, 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 that's a common misconception, in fact.
Thank you very much. Andrei?
Well,
do you have something?
Maybe on China.
I support totally what Mikaa said. Thank you indeed. Regarding China, well, actually, Yamal Lng is regarded by the Chinese as the first ever mega project globally, which has been implemented within the framework of the Polar Silk Road and the actually of the Belt and Road Initiative globally. So it's an enormous investment, and the Chinese have been very active along the Russian Arctic on a number of projects. For example, tourist traffic to many places in the Russian Arctic, starting from Murmansk in the west and to Chukotka in the east. I've seen many Chinese tourists in Murmansk district this year. They have been discussing projects of constructing a deep sea port in Arkhangelsk to eventually reload many of the Chinese goods, although really this project seems to have failed, rather, because they have opted to bypass Russia and to go directly to Central Europe and to Finland and Norway, among others. There has been a discussion about a rare earth deposit in Tomtor in northern Yakutia, where Chinese are very keen to be there and to offtake much of the production, and a number of others. So the Chinese are really very active, and honestly, Russians are both happy and also cautious about that, because we know the Chinese can be very tough investors. But indeed, their interest is very large scale and very long term. And there was a question about environmental impact of the shipping along the Northern Sea route. Yes, indeed, and that's really a challenge for Russia to not merely introduce very stringent environmental regulations, which are there, but also to enforce those regulations rigorously. And our government is working on that. But really much also needs to be done to avoid accidents there in terms of better navigation support and so on. There is a long-term strategy to do that. And last but not the least, there was a decision which was taken by the International Maritime Organization a few years ago that heavy fuel oil will not be allowed for any Arctic shipping, including notably Russia. And honestly, nobody knows how to comply with that, either Russians or Americans or Canadians or Norwegians for that kind of sake. But as a long-term move, yes, indeed, this will be an important way of reducing the contamination. And last but not the least, the Russian LNG projects along the Arctic coast, and it's not just this Yamal Lng, there are a number of others, both in Yamal Peninsula and other places. One of their goals is essentially to fuel the shipping along the Northern Sea route with LNG, which will then help greatly to move from heavy fuel oil to nuclear and clean natural gas propulsion. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, just a small remark to brilliant answers of my colleagues. Well, speaking about the ice-class ships, Rosatom is the only operator of nuclear-powered ships in the world, and that's quite a challenge for us to operate in the Arctic, and that's why we developed low-carbon energy solutions, and of course. These nuclear icebreakers will contribute to achieving net zero effect in the Arctic.
Thank you very much. Should we continue or should we stop? Because we are really out of time. What do you say, Cedric?
Yes, I think it's one question remaining. Very short answer, maybe. Very short. Apart from the fuel cell train projects with Japan, what other hydrogen projects or partnerships does Russia have with other countries? Well, short question, short answer, please.
Short answer. For the moment, none. And to end that question, maybe something's going to happen with Norway as part of the Arctic Council or not. But the best prospects at the moment for Russia vis-a-vis hydrogen internationally, it's with South Korea and maybe China, or India in the coming years. But at the moment, it's mostly Japan, and it's only Japan, and it might go further, but it's not decided yet.
I think we have almost not spoken about China, which is strange because, as I understand, it was meant to help China bring goods to the West through another route than the Asian one. But anyway, maybe this for another time.
Yes.
Maybe China and the sea is a very good project because it's a very subject, because there is a brutal entering of China into the sea, whatever, military and for transportation, which has started only in the 21st century. So we might talk about this another time.
Yeah. It will be for another Alumni World Tour, I think.
Yes.
Yes. So I think it's our last words. So especially, excuse me for all the questions, but I think we have to finish this conference. So thank you very much for joining, and I let my colleague Maxime to add a conclusion to this conference. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you to all. Thank you, Cedric. Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Miko. And thank you, Professor Krivotorov. And thank you, Mr. Larionov. It was a pleasure meeting you. And I invite you to follow us on LinkedIn, because tomorrow we continue our Alumni World Tour. We will have a conference, a very, very interesting conference about Lebanon. And the political situation in Lebanon. So make sure you join us tomorrow. The subscription link is on the SciencePo alumni website. So wherever you are in the world, I thank you very much for coming. You were over 80 participants, and we're very happy to see that and see that the project works. So thank you again to all of you. Thank you to our partners, the Junior Business Class France Russia, and Sciences Po alumni, of course, and HEC alumni. See you tomorrow. I hope you will be there.